Hi boys, this is our last video from chapter 11, section 2. And once again, I will really encourage you to re-watch any other simplifying radical videos, especially multiplying radicals, because as you can see, we are going to be multiplying radicals. However, the difference is we are multiplying radical expressions because there is more than one term through addition and subtraction within the parentheses. I will go into detail a little bit how to multiply, but I think that the other video does a better job. So I would definitely review that if you are not confident with your multiplying radicals skills. So in this one, some of you might have already picked up on it. We have radical 5 times all of 4 minus radical 20. So we're going to use the distributive property to say radical 5 times 4. When there's a radical times a whole number, you don't say 4 times 5 is 20. You do not. You just say the whole number 4 times radical 5 and leave them as their original terms, I guess we can call them. And then we're going to have minus radical 5 times radical 20. Because they're both in the radical symbol, you are allowed to say 5 times 20 is 100 and keep it within the square root. And then once you have distributed, always check to see if you can simplify anything. I cannot simplify 4 root 5 because 5 is prime and there's no perfect square factors of 5, but I can simplify the square root of 100 because 100 is a perfect square. So I can go ahead and rewrite 4 root 5 now minus 10, and that would be your final answer. You cannot combine 4 and 6 together because 10 does not have a root 5, so they stay separate terms. In the second example, you should be thinking of foiling because if you notice, these look very similar to our factoring section where we had the 2 binomials or some trinomial examples where you had to distribute more than one time. So for foiling, we did first, then outer, inner, last. I'm not going into as much detail as your textbook does to show the work. I'm going to verbally explain it. But if you would like to refer to the textbook as I verbally explain, I'm using example B on page 722, and they show a little bit more detail with each of the steps, which I don't necessarily need to see for your homework if you're comfortable with multiplying radicals. So to start with our first for foiling, I see radical 7 times radical 7. I'm hoping that most of you remembered from the video that when you multiply the same number within the radical by itself, you can just say it becomes a whole number 7, and we get rid of the radical. Then we are going to be multiplying radical 7 times negative 3 root 2. I cannot multiply 7 times negative 3, so that has to stay as negative 3, but I can multiply radical 7 times radical 2, which is 14. 7 times 2 is 14. So now we just took care of our first and outer. Then when we deal with inner, we have radical 2 times radical 7, and they're both positive, so it's going to be plus radical 14. And then we're going to say radical 2 times negative 3 root 2. Now what happens is the negative 3 stays because we can't multiply 2 times the whole number, but we can have the two radicals multiplied together. And once again, just like radical 7 times radical 7 gives you just the whole number 7, the same thing happens here. Radical 2 times radical 2 gives you just 2. So you're now multiplying 3 times the whole number 2, not just a radical 2. And then we can start to simplify. So the first thing I would simplify is negative 3 times 2. So I'm going to rewrite 7 minus 3 radical 14 plus radical 14 minus 6. And I like to put the whole numbers or integers first, so I'm just going to say 7 minus 6 is 1. And then I look at negative, so these are the ones I combine first, the whole numbers. And then I'm looking at negative 3 radical 14 and radical 14. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. And then radical 14 stays as it is. Now, 14 is not a prime number, but if we think to simplify 14, are there any perfect squares that go into that? No, the only factors of 14 are 1 and 14, or 7 and 2. So this answer cannot be simplified any further, and you are done.